The Armenian Genocide was a brutal and successful extermination of the Armenian people in the Ottoman Caliphate. It started on April 24th, 1915 and ended in 1923. However, massacres of Armenians had already begun in 1894 in the Ottoman Caliphate.
The primary ethnic group in this conflict who were targeted were Armenians. However, the Armenian Genocide also included the killing of many other minority groups, primarily Assyrians, Greeks, and Arabs.
Most of the killing happened in the Ottoman provinces of Izmir, Sivas, Deir ez-Zor, and Mus. In addition to the massacres, there were also death marches and mass imprisonments.
About 1.5 million people fell victim to the systematic killing carried out by the Caliphate.
The word genocide was coined by Raphael Lemkin because of the successful, premeditated, and legal annihilation of the Armenian peoples within Anatolia.
The Turkish people became so opposed to the Christian Armenian minority in their country because they were usually seen as well off, as the majority of Armenians were merchants and industrialists in a time where the Ottoman Empire had fallen from glory and the average Turk was a mere peasant. The Ottomans at that point had lost countless wars against the Russians in Crimea and their eastern territories, and in World War I, the Ottoman Empire was again losing to the Russians in eastern Anatolia, which was mostly populated by Armenians. So the Young Turks, who were the leaders of the Ottoman Empire at that time, blamed the Armenians for cooperating with the Russians, similar to Hitler's Germany, in which Jews were blamed for Germany's downfall and economic distress, and proceeded to use that as justification to exterminate the Armenian people.
Babies were burned alive and trampled by horses. People were forced to ride on boats fated to be sunk at sea. One district after another was cleared systematically, and long death marches took place. Through the Syrian desert to Deir ez-Zor, they were given little food and died as they marched. The Armenians were then killed at their final destination.
One of the many victims of the brutal massacre, Shogir Tolnain, shares her accounts of the day her village was massacred. On the day of Vardarvar 1915, the Turkish askers brought Chechen brigands from Dagestan to massacre us. They came to our village and robbed everything. They took away our sheep, oxen, and properties. Those who were good looking were taken away. My aunt's youngest son, who was staying with me, was also taken away, together with all the males in the town. They gathered the young and elderly in the stables of the Azut village, set fire, and burned them alive. Those cattle sheds were as large as those of our collective farms. They shut people in the stables of Malkas Mardo. They piled up stacks of hay around them, poured kerosene, and set them on fire. 60 members of our great family were burned in those stables. I do not wish my enemy to see the days I have seen now. Only I and my brothers were saved. From the beginning, they took away the young, pretty brides and the girls to Turkify them, and also they pulled away the male infants from their mothers' arms to make them policemen in the future. The stable was filled with smoke and fire. People started to cough and choke. Mothers forgot about their children low. It was real Sodom and Gomorrah. People ran on fire to and fro, struck against the walls, trod upon infants and children who had fallen on the ground. What I have seen with my eyes, lo, I do not wish the wolves of the mountain to see. They say that at these distressing scenes, the Turkish Malu hung himself. During that turmoil, the greatest part of the people choked and perished. The roof of the stables collapsed and fell upon the dead. I wish I and my little brother had been burned down in that stable and had not seen how 60 souls were burned alive. I wish I had not seen the cruel and ungodly acts of those religious people. The Armenians of the neighboring villages of Vardanis, Mashikistan, Argibanis, Azut, Kenver, and others were burnt in the same manner in their stables. I do not wish my enemy to see what I have seen. There was a very old woman among us. Those who knew her called her Polo, Arshak's mother-in-law. She was about 100 years old. When smoke began to enter the stable, she gathered the children and made them lie on their faces with their nose and mouth on the ground. She made their mothers lay on them. She made my brother also lie on the ground. She took off her apron, covered him with it, and pushed me to lie down on my brother, and not let him get up, even if he cried. May God bless her soul.
Martiros Ashikian was born after the Armenian Genocide in 1927 in Syria's Aleppo. He tells how he met a Bedouin one day who escorted him to the Armenian cave. The Bedouin told him the story of how Turks gathered and burned 40,000 Armenians in that cave. We went inside the dark cave. I had taken with me a torch and a sack. The Arab shepherd said, "We always enter the cave of Jessar Shedadi, which is 7 to 8 miles long, to take out gold bracelets, tooth crowns, and other ornaments." We went about 50 to 60 meters deeper in the cave, and we came across a pit 10 to 15 meters in diameter. On one side, the cave continued deeper in the direction of the river Kabur. The Arab continued, "After Deir Zur, about 70 miles to the northeast, there's a desert where there was no water and sown fields. The Turks brought here about 40,000 Armenian survivors miraculously saved from Deir Zur, tormented them on the road, making them go on foot for 70 miles on the scorching sands of the desert without giving them a drop of water. They brought these poor Armenians, who were emaciated and all skin and bones, and packed them alive in the cave or threw them in this pit. Then they brought thorny bushes and tree branches and covered the mouth of the pit of the entrance to the cave and set everything on fire. I am now 65 years old and I can remember very well. I saw everything with my own eyes. The poor Armenians were about 40,000 people. We went deeper, about 200 feet, into the cave with our torches and sack. Human bones and skulls were under our feet. We filled our sack with some bones and skulls. The light of our torch began to fade away and finally went out. We were in total darkness and holding each other's hand. We tried to find our way out of the cave. We groped our way, failing and getting up on the bumpy ground, down the grotto. At last, we saw a glimmer of light. We were glad that God showed us the light and led us to this wide world. I recited the Lord's Prayer and drew a large cross before the entrance of the cave. I took the sack of bones with me and kept it under my bed. I should have delivered the sack of bones to the church, but I was too young at that time and I did not know what to do. I buried it later in my deceased sister's grave. Later, when I went to Aleppo, I told my sad adventure to the Zaytun Khan people. Everybody listened with attention. One of them exclaimed, "I have escaped from that pit. I've come out from under the corpses when the rainwater started to flow into the pit from where they joined the Kabul River." After the sufferings of deportation, the elderly people and children who were still alive but hungry and thirsty, reduced to a bag of bones, were packed into the pit and the cave and burned alive.
After these horrendous mass killings, incinerations, and rapes by the Turkish and Ottoman government, the world turned a blind eye to it all.
It would take decades before countries would even start to recognize the genocide.
To this day, only 32 countries have recognized the genocide. The United States only came to recognize it in December of last year, as previously the Turkish government had lobbied against it, resulting in the recognition being denied during the Bush administration.
The denial of the genocide has encouraged dictators such as Hitler to carry out his own genocide of the Jewish people in Europe, killing 6 million of them because Turkey did not face any backlash in this genocide. And though 32 governments recognize the genocide today, the Turkish government still does not receive backlash from these governments.
And so we, and further the victims and survivors of the disgusting genocide, ask you, if you live in these countries where the Armenian Genocide is not recognized, especially in Turkey, to petition your local governments to recognize this travesty.
Even citizens of countries that already recognize it can do more by petitioning their government to pressure foreign governments to recognize this genocide.
And so,
with your help,
we
can ensure and guarantee that there are consequences for governments who may seek to massacre their own people.